On the morning of July 29, 1977, in a federal courthouse in downtown Los Angeles, a 63-year-old man with slicked gray hair and a face like worn leather raised his right hand and swore to tell the whole truth. Because of that oath, the Cosa Nostra lost the West Coast. Jimmy Fratianno was made. He carried button rank in the Los Angeles crime family. He had killed on command for 30 years. He knew the basement rooms, the parking lot handoffs, the names behind the wire transfers. And now he was about to say them all out loud. The courtroom held 47 seats. Everyone was full. Federal prosecutors had flown in from 4 cities. The recorder spun at 15 inches per second. Fratianno leaned into the microphone and started naming names. This is how one man destroyed an empire built on silence. Jimmy Fratianno was born Aladina Fratianno in Naples in 1913, the year the Underwood Typewriter Company introduced the first portable machine. His family sailed into New York Harbor when he was 1. They moved west to Cleveland. His father worked a steel mill. His mother cleaned houses. The neighborhood was Irish, Polish, and Italian. The streets smelled like coal dust and cabbage. Jimmy dropped out of school at 14. He was small, 5 feet 6 inches, 140 pounds in his shoes, but fast with his hands. He ran with a crew that stole car batteries off Model T Fords parked outside factories. They sold the lead. A battery weighed 40 pounds. They could strip 6 cars in 11 minutes. In 1930, when he was 17, Jimmy was arrested for the first time, assault with a deadly weapon. The charge was dropped. A witness changed his story. It would become a pattern. Witnesses changed their stories around Jimmy, or they disappeared. Cleveland in the 1930s was a bootleg city. Prohibition had 3 more years to run. The Mayfield Road mob controlled the liquor trade on the east side. They were Sicilian, old country rules, made men only. Jimmy was Neapolitan, not Sicilian, so he ran errands, drove trucks, carried cash. He learned to keep his mouth shut and his hands ready. In 1933, at a backroom card game on East 110th Street, Jimmy met Johnny Rosselli. Rosselli was smooth, 28 years old, Chicago outfit, stationed in Los Angeles. He wore tailored suits and Oxford shoes. He shook Jimmy's hand and said Los Angeles needed people who understood respect. Because of that handshake, Jimmy moved west in 1934. Los Angeles was wide open. The LAPD Vice Squad took cash from 14 different organizations. The port moved opium and heroin through warehouse fronts on Terminal Island. The movie studios paid protection to keep strikes off the lots. Jack Dragna ran the Los Angeles family. He was Sicilian, old school, careful. He controlled bookmaking, labor shakedowns, and the garment district. Dragna liked Jimmy because Jimmy was small and quiet and did not ask questions. In 1937, Dragna ordered Jimmy to handle a problem. A bookie named Tony Trombino was skimming. Trombino worked the downtown tracks and kept 2 sets of books. Dragna wanted it stopped. Jimmy found Trombino in the parking lot of the Hollywood Park racetrack on a Tuesday afternoon. It took 2 shots, both to the head, a .38 revolver, 4-inch barrel. Trombino fell between 2 Packards. Jimmy walked back to his car, a 1936 Chevrolet, and drove north on Western Avenue at 28 miles per hour. Nobody followed. Because of that clean hit, Jimmy became a trusted soldier. Through the 1940s, Jimmy worked the Los Angeles rackets. He ran a dice game in a storefront on South Main Street. The game paid Dragna $300 a week. He handled collections from bookies in Inglewood and Gardena. He broke 2 arms and 1 collarbone in the first 6 months. After that, everyone paid on time. In 1947, Dragna sent Jimmy to Las Vegas. The city had 4 legal casinos and 11,000 people. The mob had built the Flamingo with money skimmed from Teamster pension funds. Bugsy Siegel ran the place until he got shot in Beverly Hills. After that, the commission divided the skim. Jimmy's job was to watch the count rooms, make sure the Los Angeles share stayed correct. He sat in a chair in the back of the cage at the Flamingo for 8 hours a night, 6 nights a week, and watched dealers stack chips. He was paid $500 a week, cash, no taxes, no records. Vegas was a construction zone. New casinos went up every year. The Thunderbird opened in 1948, the Desert Inn in 1950, the Sahara in 1952. Each one had a count room, and each count room needed watchers. Jimmy recruited a crew of 6 men, all from California families, all vouched. They rotated shifts. The skim averaged $40,000 a month per casino. Jimmy's cut was 10%. He bought a house in Culver City with a pool and a grapefruit tree. But Jimmy was Neapolitan, not Sicilian. That mattered. In 1952, Jack Dragna told Jimmy he could not be made. The rules were old, written in Sicily, carved into bloodlines. Only full Sicilians could take the oath. Jimmy was muscle, a good earner, but he would never be a button. It burned. Jimmy had killed for the family. He had taken risks, done time, a 6-month stretch in county for bookmaking in 1949, never said a word. And now Dragna told him he was second class. Because of that insult, Jimmy started looking for his own angles. In 1953, Jimmy opened a trucking company, Fratianno Freight, in San Pedro. It was a front. He hired teamsters, paid them union scale, then used the trucks to move stolen goods, cigarettes mostly, hijacked from warehouses in Long Beach and driven to buyers in Phoenix and Tucson. The operation cleared $2,000 a week. Dragna never knew. Jack Dragna died in February 1956, heart attack, age 65. Frank DeSimone took over the Los Angeles family. DeSimone was a lawyer, cautious, political. He did not like Jimmy. He thought Jimmy was loud, reckless, too ambitious. But Jimmy was earning, so DeSimone kept him on the bookmaking crew. In 1960, Jimmy got a call from Johnny Rosselli. Rosselli said the outfit in Chicago wanted help with a problem in Cuba. Fidel Castro had taken over the island and shut down the casinos. The mob lost millions. The CIA wanted Castro gone. Rosselli said the agency was paying $150,000 for a clean hit. Jimmy said no. He did not trust the government. He did not trust anything that complicated. Because of that refusal, Rosselli went ahead without him. The hit never happened. Castro lived another 56 years. In 1964, Frank DeSimone finally made Jimmy. The rules had changed. The commission opened the books to non-Sicilians. Calabrians, Neapolitans, even some northern Italians could take the oath if a boss vouched. DeSimone vouched for Jimmy. The ceremony was held at a house in Pasadena on a Saturday afternoon. There were 8 men in the room. Jimmy pricked his finger with a pin, let the blood drip onto a picture of a saint, then set the picture on fire while it sat in his palm. He repeated the words. He was 51 years old. Because of that oath, Jimmy became a made man, a button, a member of Cosa Nostra. But the world was changing. Robert Kennedy was Attorney General from 1961 to 1964. He created organized crime task forces in 12 cities. He started using wiretaps, legal ones, authorized by judges under new laws. In 1963, Joe Velake testified before a Senate subcommittee and called it Cosa Nostra on national television. The name went public. The secrecy cracked. Jimmy kept working. He ran a loan sharking operation out of a bar in Westchester. He charged 2% a week, 104% a year, compounded. If you borrowed $10,000, you owed $20,412 months. If you did not pay, Jimmy sent a man named Frank Bompensiero to explain the terms. Bompensiero was 6 feet tall, 220 pounds, hands like cinder blocks. He broke 4 kneecaps in 1965. Everyone paid after that. In 1967, Frank DeSimone died, cancer, age 59. The Los Angeles family fractured. There was no clear successor. Chicago sent word that Nick Licata would take over. Licata was old, 67, sick, barely functional. The real power moved to San Francisco, where the outfit controlled the docks and the North Beach nightclubs. Jimmy started spending more time in the Bay Area. In San Francisco, Jimmy worked with a capo named Jimmy Lanza. Lanza ran extortion rackets in the garment district and controlled Teamster locals at the port. They shook down shipping companies, took cash to prevent strikes. A longshoreman strike in 1968 cost the port $3 million in 11 days. Lanza called it off for a $50,000 payment, delivered in a suitcase, small bills, no sequence. In 1970, Nick Licata died. The commission appointed Dominic Brooklier to run Los Angeles. Brooklier was a convict, tough, loyal, but not smart. He trusted Jimmy. He made Jimmy acting boss while he handled other business. For 2 years, Jimmy ran the Los Angeles family. He collected tribute from 40 bookies, 12 loan sharks, and 6 labor locals. He cleared $800,000 a year. He bought a second house in La Jolla, Ocean View, 4 bedrooms. But the FBI was closing in. In 1972, agents installed a microphone in a Teamster office in Los Angeles. They recorded 140 hours of conversation. Jimmy's voice was on 60 of those tapes. He talked about skim, about hits, about payments to judges. The tapes were clean, legally obtained, admissible. Because of those recordings, a grand jury indicted Jimmy in October 1973 for extortion and conspiracy. Jimmy went to trial in federal court in Los Angeles in March 1974. The prosecution played the tapes. The jury heard Jimmy say he would break a man's arms. They heard him talk about splitting $25,000 with a union boss. The trial lasted 9 days. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced Jimmy to 10 years in federal prison. He was 61. He reported to Terminal Island on June 12, 1974. Inmate number 903-25012. Terminal Island was a low-security facility on a man-made island in Los Angeles Harbor. It held 800 prisoners. Jimmy shared a cell with a counterfeiter from Fresno. Inside, Jimmy stayed quiet. He read newspapers. He walked the yard. He kept his mouth shut. But the world outside kept moving. In 1975, Frank Bompensiero, the enforcer who worked with Jimmy for 20 years, was arrested by the FBI on weapons charges. The agents offered him a deal. Bompensiero took it. He became an informant. He wore a wire. He recorded conversations with 14 mobsters. Jimmy was one of them. In January 1976, FBI Special Agent Jack Armstrong visited Jimmy at Terminal Island. Armstrong was 38, a 12-year veteran, assigned to the Organized Crime Division in Los Angeles. He sat across from Jimmy in a cinder block room and told him Bompensiero was cooperating. He said the tapes were solid. He said the Bureau could file new charges that would add 20 years to Jimmy's sentence. Or Jimmy could talk. Jimmy said nothing. He went back to his cell. He thought about it for 6 days. He was 62. He had served 18 months. He had 8.5 years left. If the FBI added another 20, he would die inside. Because of that math, Jimmy called for Armstrong on January 19, 1976. The meeting lasted 2 hours. Armstrong brought a tape recorder. Jimmy laid out the structure of the Los Angeles family, the chains of command, the revenue streams. the names of every active member. Armstrong wrote 14 pages of notes. At the end, Jimmy said he wanted full immunity and witness protection. Armstrong said he would talk to the U.S. attorney. Because of that meeting, the FBI opened a file, codename Weasel. Over the next 6 months, Jimmy gave 47 interviews. He sat in that same cinder block room and talked for 4 to 6 hours at a time. He described murders, extortions, arson schemes, labor payoffs. He named bosses in 11 cities. He drew organizational charts. He explained how the skim worked in Vegas, how the family split the take, how the money moved through cash businesses and ended up in Swiss accounts. He gave dates, amounts, locations. The FBI recorded every word. In July 1976, the U.S. Attorney for the Central District of California signed an immunity agreement. Jimmy would testify in federal court against members of organized crime. In exchange, the government would drop the additional charges, reduce his sentence to time served, and place him in the Witness Protection Program. Jimmy signed the deal on July 30, 1976. Because of that signature, he became the first made member of the Los Angeles family to turn federal witness. On August 3, 1976, Jimmy walked out of Terminal Island. A marshal drove him to a safe house in Glendale. He stayed there for 4 months, debriefed by agents from 6 different FBI field offices. They asked about Chicago, about Kansas City, about Cleveland. Jimmy answered every question. He was detailed, precise, methodical. He remembered names from the 1940s, addresses from the 1950s, conversations from the 1960s. In December 1976, the FBI relocated Jimmy to a suburb outside Washington, D.C. They gave him a new name, James Marino. They rented him a 2-bedroom apartment, paid $380 a month. They gave him a stipend, $1,200 a month, and a part-time job as a consultant, meaning he sat in FBI offices and answered questions. The first trial came in March 1977, United States v. Brooklier. Dominic Brooklier, boss of the Los Angeles family, was charged with extortion and conspiracy. Jimmy testified for 3 days. He described the hierarchy, the tribute system, the enforcement mechanisms. He told the jury how Brooklier ordered a beating in 1972, how much it cost, who did it. The defense attorney tried to break him on cross-examination. Jimmy did not blink. He repeated the same facts, same dates, same amounts. The jury convicted Brooklier on June 14, 1977. The judge gave him 20 years. Because of that testimony, the Los Angeles family lost its boss. Jimmy testified in 11 more trials between 1977 and 1980. United States versus Licavoli in Cleveland. 4 defendants, 3 convictions. United States versus Savella in Kansas City. 7 defendants, 6 convictions. United States versus Ayupa in Chicago. 12 defendants, 9 convictions. He appeared in courtrooms in Detroit, Milwaukee, and Newark. He sat in the witness box, raised his right hand, and repeated the story. Every time, the juries believed him. Because of those trials, 57 mobsters went to prison in the first 2 years. The mob noticed. In February 1978, Frank Bompanziero was shot 5 times in a phone booth in San Diego. The shooter used a .22 caliber pistol, a classic mob hit weapon. Quiet, low muzzle flash. Bompanziero died at the scene. He had been cooperating with the FBI for 3 years. The hit was a message. No one retires. No one talks. The FBI moved Jimmy again. They sent him to a suburb outside Atlanta. New name, new apartment, new stipend. He stayed there for 8 months. Then they moved him to Phoenix. Then to Omaha. Between 1978 and 1981, Jimmy lived in 9 different cities. The marshals called it protective rotation. Jimmy called it exile. But the trials kept coming. In October 1979, Jimmy testified in United States versus Tronolone in Los Angeles. Louis Tronolone was charged with conspiracy to commit murder. Jimmy said Tronolone ordered the hit on a San Fernando Valley bookie in 1974. He described the planning meeting, who attended, what was said. Tronolone was convicted and sentenced to life without parole. Because of that testimony, the California mob lost another soldier. In November 1980, Jimmy testified in United States versus Dorfman in Chicago. Alan Dorfman controlled the Teamster Pension Fund. The mob used that fund to finance casino construction in Las Vegas. Dorfman moved $400 million between 1960 and 1980, all off the books, all at the direction of Chicago and Kansas City families. Jimmy explained how the skim worked, how Dorfman layered the money through shell companies, how the families split the profit. Dorfman was convicted on January 21, 1981. He was sentenced to 55 years. He was shot and killed in a parking lot in suburban Chicago 16 days later, 7 bullets, .22 caliber, professional. By the end of 1981, Jimmy's testimony had led to the conviction of 78 mobsters across 8 states. The FBI estimated his cooperation dismantled 40% of the active crews on the West Coast. The Los Angeles family was finished. The San Francisco family lost half its made members. Cleveland, Kansas City, and Milwaukee families were prosecuted into irrelevance. Because of one man, the Cosa Nostra lost the territory west of the Mississippi. But Jimmy paid. He lived under guard, in anonymous apartments, in cities with no memory. He could not call his daughter. He could not visit his grandchildren. His wife, Jewel, stayed with him in witness protection until 1979, then left. She said she could not live like that anymore. Jimmy signed the divorce papers in a federal building in Omaha and never saw her again. In 1981, the FBI asked Jimmy to write a book. They wanted the full story, the details, the names, the operations. They wanted it on the record. Jimmy agreed. He hired an author, Ovid Demarest, and spent 9 months talking into a tape recorder. The book, The Last Mafioso, was published by Times Books in March 1981. It was 510 pages long. It sold 83,000 copies in the first 3 months. It named 200 mobsters. It described 14 murders. It laid out the structure of 6 crime families. Because of that book, prosecutors in 4 states opened new investigations. In 1982, the commission put a contract on Jimmy. The bounty was $500,000. Every family from New York to Los Angeles sent word to their crews. Find him. Kill him. The FBI moved Jimmy again. They sent him to a city they never disclosed. They gave him a new name, a final name. They said he could never testify again, could never appear in public, could never contact anyone from his old life. Jimmy lived under that sentence for 11 years. He stayed in a small apartment. He watched television. He read newspapers. He took walks, always with a marshal 50 feet behind. He grew old, slow, invisible. On June 30th, 1993, Jimmy Fratianno died of natural causes in a city the FBI never named. He was 79. The Bureau issued a 1-sentence statement. Former organized crime figure James Fratianno, who testified in multiple federal cases, died of natural causes. No service was held. No obituary ran. The contract stayed open until the day he died, but no one collected. Because of witness protection, Jimmy Fratianno outlived the empire he destroyed. The numbers tell the story. Between 1976 and 1983, 252 mobsters were convicted in trials where Jimmy testified or provided evidence. The Los Angeles family went from 60 active members in 1975 to 11 in 1985. The San Francisco family dissolved. The Cleveland family stopped operating. Kansas City, Milwaukee, and Detroit families lost their bosses and their infrastructure. By 1990, the FBI estimated that organized crime west of Chicago had been reduced by 70% in operational capacity and 80% in revenue. Because of one man's decision in a prison cell, the American Mafia lost the West Coast. But the cost was not zero. Frank Bompenziero shot in a phone booth. Alan Dorfman shot in a parking lot. At least 6 other witnesses were killed or disappeared between 1978 and 1985. The mob did not forgive. The mob did not forget. Jimmy Fratianno was not a hero. He killed. He extorted. He broke bones and burned businesses. He took an oath and lived by it for 42 years. Then he broke that oath to save himself. The FBI called him the most significant organized crime witness in American history. The mob called him a rat. Both were right. The last time anyone saw Jimmy, according to a redacted FBI memo released in 2003, was in a grocery store in an unnamed city in 1991. He was buying bread and milk. A marshal watched from the end of the aisle. Jimmy paid cash, exact change, and walked back to a car driven by someone the memo does not name. He was 78. He was alone. He was alive. Because of choices made in a cinder block room 15 years earlier, he had outlasted the organization that once owned him. The Mafia still exists. Families still operate in New York, Chicago, and Philadelphia. But they do not control cities anymore. They do not own unions. They do not run Vegas, the glory days, the 1950s and 1960s, when the mob moved billions and owned judges and built casinos with pension fund money. Those days ended when Jimmy Fratianno raised his right hand in a federal courtroom and said the names out loud. Because of that, the American Mafia became a ghost, and Jimmy the Weasel became the man who killed it.